Hi, thank you for joining me. I'm Larry Taylor. We're studying the Sermon on the Mount, and in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, we have uh, one of the most famous statements in the entire world. We call it the Golden Rule. Jesus said, "So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets." That phrase, law and prophets, is Jewish shorthand for Old Testament. It's the way that uh, it's the common term that Jewish people, Jesus was Jewish, all of his original disciples were Jewish. It's the common term that they use to describe the Old Testament. The Old Testament actually consists of three parts, or three different kinds of literature. The law, which would be the first five books of the Bible, and then we have the writings, some of which are historical, others of which are poetry and such, and then we have the prophets. And that got shortened in Jewish vernacular to the law and the prophets. So Jesus is saying, whatever you wish others would do to you, do also to them, because that fulfills everything in the Old Testament. He's talking to a Jewish group of people, a large group of Jewish people. And he says to them, and so these are people who are concerned with following the scriptures, with doing what they are told to do in what we would call the Old Testament. To them, it was just simply the Bible. That portion of the Bible which is written in Hebrew. So they're concerned with practicing what the Old Testament says to do, and Jesus says, let me summarize it all in one statement for you. Whatever you wish others would do to you, do also to them. Now, it's been pointed out by many people that essentially the same thing, the same phrase, the same statement occurs across the board in the writings of every major religion and even most of the minor religions. And that's almost true. But in every other instance, the phrase is put in the negative. Don't do to others what you don't want done to you. So I would prefer not to be smacked in the face. Therefore, I don't go around smacking people in the face. I would prefer not to be cheated. So I don't want to cheat others. I would prefer that others be honest with me, so I avoid being dishonest with them. Every religion in the ancient world had a statement similar to that. Even the Christians in the late first, early second century, they had a little manual called the Didache. That was a manual of how to live a practical Christian life. It was a manual for communities of faith. And even there, this is put in the negative. Jesus takes a common saying, a saying that existed centuries before he came, a statement which essentially said, don't do to others what you don't want others to do for you, or something similar. He takes it and he flips it completely around. He makes it a positive statement. He puts the impetus on us. It's not just avoiding doing what I don't want done to me. It's that I have to actively go, if I'm going to follow Jesus, I have to actively go and do for others what I wish others would do for me. I need to be proactive. I need to start the process. And so the so-called golden rule, which summarizes the entire teaching of the Old Testament, is all summed up in this one beautiful phrase that requires of me to take the initiative, to be proactive in doing, to go and do for others what I would like others to do for me. And I'm to go and do for others without any thought of getting anything back. I'm not doing for others in order that they might do the same back to me. How often have you heard this golden rule misquoted? Sometimes it's quoted in the negative. Don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Sometimes I've heard people mock it and say, make sure you do to others before they have a chance to do to you. That's exactly the opposite. That's blasphemy. It's exactly the opposite of what Jesus is saying. He's saying that I need to take the initiative to be kind and to be gracious and to be loving and to treat others with dignity and respect and understanding, just like I would like to be treated with dignity and respect and understanding. And I'm not doing it in order that they'll treat me well. They may or they may not. They may completely reject my offers of love. I mean, they did with him, some of the people, didn't they? He came with this loving, caring heart. And some of the people accused him of being of the devil. And some of the people got together and plotted to have him murdered. So we're not doing the right thing in order to get anything for ourselves. We're doing the right thing because we're followers of Jesus. Jesus is summarizing in this statement here in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. He's summarizing the essence of his ethical teaching. He's pulling together everything that he has taught us in the Sermon on the Mount, and in fact, everything that the entire Hebrew Bible teaches. He's bringing it all together, and he's summarizing it. He told us to turn the other cheek and to go the second mile. He teaches us to wash feet. He teaches us to have servants' hearts. He teaches us to love in the same way that he loves. He teaches us to forgive everyone, including our enemies. He teaches us to be non-violent, to never respond to violence with violence. He teaches us to be people of prayer and compassion. He teaches us to be steadfast in our prayers, to keep on seeking and knocking and asking. He teaches us to be kind and gracious, to have servants' hearts. And we don't do it because we're hoping to gain something out of it. We do it because we love Jesus. And his love has filled our hearts. And we want to simply reflect that love. Oh, that the whole world could see Jesus and know Jesus. But how are they going to see Jesus unless they see Jesus in us? Oh, that God would so inundate us with grace and mercy and kindness, so saturate us with cross-shaped, cruciform love. Love that looks like the self-sacrificial love that Jesus displayed on the cross, that God would so saturate us with that kind of love that others would only see Jesus in us and not ourselves. That we would lead people past ourselves and into the loving arms of Jesus, that we would stop judging others, that we would stop arguing with each other, that we would stop putting each other down, and that we would treat each other with the love and the dignity that Christ gives to us so that they can see Jesus and follow Jesus. Go and actively do for others what you would have them do for you. What would you want done if you were homeless? How would you want to be treated? If you were a refugee up against a literal wall, fleeing from violence, nowhere to go, how would you want to be treated? If you were sick in a hospital, how would you want to be cared for? If you were incarcerated, how would you want to be treated? If you were hungry or homeless or mentally ill, or a member of a despised minority race or the victim of racism, how would you want to be treated? If you were gay or lesbian or trans or genderqueer, how would you want to be treated? Treat others the way you would want to be treated. And when you do, you are pulling together the heart of Jesus' teaching. That's why we call it the Golden Rule. The name, I'm told, probably comes from some famous rich ruler who was so impressed with it that he had it printed on a gold plaque and put up on the wall where he could see it. Doesn't matter. I want to do what Jesus said to do. Now, elsewhere in the Gospels, Jesus is asked a question by a religious scholar who is questioning what's the most important commandment. And Jesus pulls a commandment out of Deuteronomy and one out of Leviticus, and he puts them together into one. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. He says, on those two things hang all the law and the prophets. Again, that is a summation, that's a summation of the entire teaching of the Old Testament, of the Bible. Love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus is essentially saying the same thing here in what we call the Golden Rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Everyone needs the love of God. Everyone needs to know God. Everyone needs to know that God loves them. Everyone needs to know that they can have their sins forgiven and that they can have a personal, deep, intimate, living relationship with Jesus, who is perfect love. Everyone needs that. So share that with other people. I don't mean just go tell people about it. I mean show them with your actions. Go and actively do for others. Put yourself in their shoes. Walk a mile in their moccasins, as the Native Americans used to say. And go and treat others the way you would want to be treated. Stop and think. If I were that person, if I lived in that situation, if that were my context, what is it that I would need? What is it that I would want? How is it that I would want to be treated? And then as a follower of Jesus, go and do that.